Hello there, and welcome. I'm glad you've arrived here, in this quiet corner of thought, where the world outside softens just enough to let curiosity wander. Slowly, gently, like a candle flickering in a calm room. Tonight, we're not rushing toward answers. There's no need to. Instead, we're drifting. And in that drifting, there's a kind of discovery, a kind of wonder that doesn't demand explanation, only attention. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of your day ease away, and let your mind settle into a rhythm that mirrors the slow unfolding of a story that has been told, retold, and remembered for thousands of years. The story we'll explore tonight is older than cities, older than writing, older than almost everything we think of as history. It begins not with names or dates, but with voices. Voices raised in the dark by firelight, whispering across time and space, trying to make sense of the world that surrounded them. These were people like us in some ways, curious, observant, often fearful, and always searching for meaning. But they lived in a world where almost everything was unknown. Storms struck without warning. Rivers rose and claimed land. The sky erupted in lightning and fire. Animals appeared in ways that startled or inspired them. And the earth itself could shake, swallow, or burn. To survive, to remember, to understand, they told stories. Not books, not formal records, but stories that could travel from mouth to ear, across nights and seasons and generations. Stories shaped by the limits of human language, yet rich with imagination, fear, awe, and memory. Stories that gave shape to the world, naming the formless, giving faces to forces larger than themselves. These stories became myths. And for centuries, myths have been treated as nothing more than invention, flight of fancy, the product of minds trying to explain what they could not fully comprehend. But perhaps that view is too simple. Perhaps myths are more than imagination. Perhaps myths are the shadows of memory, echoes of events that once touched the lives of humans long before we carved stone, wrote paper, or kept journals. Perhaps within the tales of gods and monsters, floods and fires, strange visitors and fallen civilizations, there is a kernel of truth. Not truth in the way we understand it now, not precise or verifiable in our modern sense, but truth in the sense that something real inspired it, a world-changing event, a remarkable creature, a celestial phenomenon, a civilization lost to time. And so tonight, we'll wander slowly into those stories. We'll listen to the myths that have survived millennia, tracing the faint outlines of the worlds they once described. We'll consider how human memory preserves what is essential, even when details fade, how emotion and experience can encode information, and how the first humans might have used narrative as a form of recording the extraordinary. The pattern of the flood, the rise of lands from water, the descent of beings from the sky, the great creatures that once roamed the earth, these images recur across continents, across languages, across cultures that had no way of speaking to one another. And when you notice those patterns, a question arises, gentle but insistent. Could it be that these stories were not only imagined, but remembered? As you listen, allow your mind to float through time. Imagine the first people who told these stories. Imagine sitting beside a fire, feeling the night press close, watching the stars glimmer above. Imagine seeing something so enormous, so terrifying, or so beautiful that it demanded to be remembered. You have no numbers, no scientific vocabulary, no maps. You only have your senses, your instincts, and the stories you can tell. And over generations, those stories stretch and bend. They grow and soften, but the core remains. A memory preserved not in documents or artifacts, but in the emotional, symbolic, and narrative fabric of a culture. And now, as you settle more deeply, feel your body softening into the space around you, allow the question that guides our journey tonight to take root. Which ancient myths might actually be true? Which of the stories passed down through countless generations are echoes of real events, real people, real phenomena, observed and remembered long before anyone thought to write them down? There is no hurry to answer. There is only the gentle act of wandering through the myths themselves, noticing the connections, the consistencies, the ways they resonate with the world we can observe today. Take another slow breath. Feel the calm rise in your chest. Let your thoughts drift to the possibility that the past is not entirely lost, that within stories of gods, giants, floods, and fires, there may be the faint pulse of real history, vibrating softly beneath the surface. And with that thought, let us begin our exploration, not with expectation, but with openness, with quiet curiosity, with the kind of attention that allows a story to unfold slowly, like smoke curling in the air, like the first glimmer of light on a horizon, like memory itself, stretching across the ages. Imagine, for a moment, the earliest humans sitting together as the sun dips below the horizon, the sky deepening into blues and purples, stars beginning to glimmer softly. There are no clocks here, no schedules, no artificial lights to interrupt the natural rhythm of the world. Only the slow cadence of time marked by the rising and setting sun, the passing seasons, the patterns of the stars. And in that quiet, people speak to one another, passing knowledge from one mind to another, from one generation to the next. Long before writing, before cities, before recorded history, humans relied on memory. And memory, in those days, was more than a recollection of events. It was a survival tool. To remember the paths of rivers, the changing behaviors of animals, the signs of storms, or the places where food and water could be found, was to survive. To forget could mean hunger, danger, or death. And so memory was cultivated carefully, intentionally, and often collectively. Oral tradition, as anthropologists call it today, was the vessel for this memory. Stories were told and retold, sometimes hundreds of times, in ways designed to endure. They were poetic, musical, rhythmic, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes cautious, but always shaped to be memorable. Certain words, certain phrases, even gestures helped lock information into the minds of listeners. The tales were more than entertainment. They were instruction manuals, historical records, and warnings wrapped into narratives humans could hold on to. Consider, for example, the stories of Aboriginal Australians. Across millennia, these stories have preserved knowledge of landscapes, animals, and natural events with astonishing accuracy. Some oral histories describe coastlines that are now submerged beneath the sea, rising steadily over thousands of years. Studies have shown that these stories recall events from more than 7,000 years ago, long before any written record existed. And yet, the essential truth of the experience, the sense of land disappearing beneath water, of survival, of loss, is preserved. The details may shift over time, shaped by generations, by language, by interpretation, but the memory of what happened endures. This is a pattern repeated across human cultures. From the Arctic tundra to the islands of the Pacific, from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Europe, humans have found ways to encode information in stories, in songs, in rituals. When an event is significant enough, terrifying enough, remarkable enough, or inspiring enough, it imprints itself on memory. The details may blur, but the emotional and structural essence remains. And as these stories pass from one generation to the next, they stretch and bend, like a river carving new paths through a landscape, but they never vanish entirely. It is here that myths begin to emerge. Myths are stories that have traveled across time, shaped not only by events themselves, but by the emotions they inspired. They are compressed data, not in the form of numbers or charts, but in the form of narrative and symbolism. When a community experiences a catastrophic flood, for instance, they may describe it as a punishment from the gods, or as a great cleansing of the world, or as the work of a monstrous creature rising from the depths. The specifics may be altered over centuries, by generations, by language, by interpretation, but the memory of what happened survives. The same is true for other enormous events. Supervolcano eruptions, for instance, have left traces not only in layers of ash and rock, but also in the stories of people who survived them. Thousands of years ago, a volcanic eruption could darken the sky for months, altering climate and food sources. For the humans who lived through such an event, the experience would have been cataclysmic, incomprehensible, yet deeply memorable. They may have described the sky turning red, fire raining from above, winds carrying ash across valleys. Generations later, those descriptions might become part of a myth, a tale of divine anger, of gods battling in the heavens, or of a world cleansed by fire. Meteor impacts and cosmic events have been similarly recorded in the language of myth. The sudden flash of a meteor, the shock wave that rattled the earth, the fire that followed would have been unforgettable. Without modern physics to explain it, early humans encoded the event as a story. Perhaps a fire serpent streaked across the sky. Perhaps the sky itself grew angry and hurled stones upon the earth. The memory of a moment when the ordinary world became extraordinary was preserved, embedded in narrative, carried forward in song and speech. Even encounters with megafauna, the enormous creatures that once roamed continents, may have shaped myths. Imagine seeing a mammoth towering over the trees, its tusks curved like the moon, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Or a giant sloth, slow and massive, brushing through the forest, leaving footprints that seemed impossible to fill. For early humans, these creatures were larger than life, and so their memory became larger than life as well. Over time, descriptions may have grown exaggerated, blended with imagination, until they became stories of giants, of monsters, of beings that walked the earth before humans took their place. The human mind is drawn to patterns, and in seeking to explain and remember extraordinary events, it naturally transforms reality into story. This transformation does not destroy truth, rather it distills it. Emotional and observational truths remain, even when factual details are softened. A story about a flood may exaggerate the height of the waves or the number of survivors, but it preserves the reality that water rose and reshaped the land. A tale of fire from the heavens may portray it as wrathful or intentional, but it reflects the undeniable fact of destruction from above. A myth of giants may describe beings with extraordinary size, but it recalls the existence of creatures much larger than humans. Across cultures, we see remarkable parallels. Flood myths, for example, appear nearly everywhere humans have lived. From Mesopotamia to the Americas, from the islands of the Pacific to the plains of Africa, tales of great waters covering the earth recur. Sky beings, ancestors descending from the heavens, golden ages lost to catastrophe, and monstrous creatures all appear in myths around the world. Some similarities may be coincidental, some may be symbolic, but others suggest a shared experience, events so monumental that they left imprints on the earliest human imagination, imprints that survived encoded in stories. Archaeology and geology provide additional evidence for these impressions. Layers of volcanic ash, sedimentary deposits from floods, traces of meteor impacts, and the bones of extinct megafauna all correspond, in some cases, with what humans remember in myth. The correlation is never perfect. Myths are not scientific reports. They are not catalogues of events. But when viewed as memory rather than invention, patterns emerge. Human memory, shaped by necessity, by survival, by attention to what matters, preserves the outline of reality, even as the details soften. And so we begin to see myths in a new light. They are not mere stories. They are vessels, carrying forward the memories of what humans once witnessed. They encode survival knowledge, environmental changes, encounters with other peoples, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the extraordinary events that shaped life long before anyone could write them down. Memory becomes story, story becomes myth, and within those myths, the seed of truth endures, waiting to be recognized by those patient enough to listen, those curious enough to imagine the world through the eyes of those who first saw it. As you continue to listen, allow yourself to drift slowly through time. Imagine sitting beside ancient fires, hearing the voices of those who experienced the impossible, the terrifying, the awe-inspiring. Let their stories unfold gently, carrying you into a world where memory was survival, where narrative was the bridge between generations, and where myth was the way humans preserved the essence of their experiences. Imagine a quiet evening, the kind where the air feels soft against your skin, and the faintest hint of water seems to shimmer just beyond sight. Picture it slowly rising, almost imperceptibly at first, a gentle tide pressing into the world. The earliest humans may have experienced this, not as an abstract concept, but as a slow, terrifying reality. Water, once distant, creeping steadily, reshaping the lands they knew, swallowing valleys, forests, and homes. And as it rose, they told stories. Stories of a world where water came first and land appeared only afterward. Stories that endured long after the waves receded, long after the original shores disappeared beneath the sea. Flood myths appear in nearly every culture on Earth. They are not confined to one region or one people. From the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the islands of the Pacific, from the forests of North America to the mountains of South America, humans have preserved the memory of catastrophic flooding in story. This universality is striking. The details vary, the names change, but the essence remains. Water rises. Humans struggle. Some survive. Entire worlds are altered. Modern science helps us understand why. At the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 to 14,000 years ago, the planet underwent massive change. Glaciers melted, ice sheets retreated, and sea levels rose by more than 100 meters over several thousand years. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath water. Continental shelves that had been walked upon for generations were submerged beneath water. Rivers swelled, lakes expanded, and coastal regions vanished. These were not gradual changes alone. There were pulses, sudden surges of meltwater, known as meltwater pulses 1A and 1B, where thousands of cubic kilometers of water flooded into the oceans in relatively short spans of time, rapidly reshaping coastlines. For people living through this, the experience must have been astonishing, incomprehensible, and terrifying. Consider the Black Sea. Today, a calm inland sea surrounded by hills and farmland. Thousands of years ago, it may have been a freshwater lake, surrounded by fertile lands, inhabited by thriving communities. Then, a massive influx of seawater from the Mediterranean breached its shores, flooding the basin rapidly. Archaeologists suggest this event, occurring around 7,500 years ago, could have submerged settlements and fertile lands, forcing survivors to flee. Could this catastrophic flood have inspired stories of great waters swallowing the earth, of humans saved only by boats or divine intervention? The parallels are hard to ignore. Similar events occurred elsewhere. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf, which connected modern islands like Borneo, Java, and Sumatra to the mainland, was gradually submerged by rising seas. Communities that had lived for generations on what was once dry land found themselves isolated on islands, surrounded by water where they had once walked. In northern Europe, Doggerland, a vast area, now beneath the North Sea, disappeared beneath rising tides,
displacing human populations and reshaping migration patterns. Each of these events could have left echoes in memory, preserved in oral traditions, later transformed into myth.
And the myths themselves reflect these experiences with remarkable fidelity. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humankind, with only one man and his family surviving aboard a boat. The waters rise, engulfing mountains and plains alike, until finally they recede and the earth begins anew. In Greek mythology, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a world-consuming flood, again by means of a vessel guided to safety. Indigenous American stories from North to South America often describe waters covering the land, leaving only a few survivors to repopulate the world, animals and humans alike fleeing or floating to higher ground. Across the Pacific, many islander myths recount ancestors escaping rising seas, guided by divine beings or spirits, surviving in canoes while islands vanish beneath the waves. Notice the patterns: rising seas, survivors in boats, loss of entire landscapes, a world described as water first, land second. Across continents and cultures, the imagery is consistent. The waters are not merely symbolic, they are remembered. The act of surviving the flood, navigating it, witnessing it reshape the world became central to these stories. It was not merely a tale of punishment or morality, though later storytellers may have framed it that way. At its core, it preserves the memory of a natural phenomenon that reshaped the human world. And the beauty of these myths lies not only in their narrative power, but in their emotional resonance. For the communities that experienced them, floods were transformative events. They were terrifying, yes, but they were also awe-inspiring. They reminded humans of the power of nature, the fragility of their existence, and the resilience required to survive. The myths encode these lessons subtly. The rising waters, the struggle to survive, the rebirth of the world afterward, these are more than plot points. They are the imprint of real experience compressed into story. It is worth pausing here, imagining what it might have felt like to live through these events, to watch familiar landscapes vanish beneath waves, to see rivers swell far beyond their banks, to hear the roar of water consuming valleys, to climb to high ground and watch your home disappear, to hold a child in your arms or a companion at your side, knowing that the world as you have known it is no longer the same, and to survive, somehow to survive. The memory of such an experience would be impossible to forget, impossible not to transmit. And yet, over time, as the story passed from one generation to another, the edges would blur. The specific dates, the exact locations, the number of people or houses lost, all would soften, change, shift. What remained would be the essence: water, loss, survival, transformation. It is remarkable to think that in cultures separated by thousands of miles, thousands of years, people might be preserving echoes of the same global phenomenon: rising seas, displaced populations, lost lands, the same core experience appearing independently in myths from the Tigris and Euphrates to the islands of Oceania. And when you allow yourself to imagine these events in this way, the line between myth and memory begins to blur.
Myths are no longer mere allegories. They are coded recollections, symbols shaped by culture, language, and human perception, carrying forward the memory of a world that existed before the maps we know today. Even today, scientists and archaeologists are uncovering evidence that supports these memories. Submerged settlements, coastal erosion patterns, sediment deposits, all point to dramatic flooding events that occurred during the last ice age and afterward. When we listen to myths alongside these findings, a fascinating picture emerges. Humans experienced, remembered, and transmitted their experiences across generations, preserving knowledge about the world long before writing or formal records.
The stories of the flood become less like fantasy and more like a bridge, connecting our understanding to the experiences of people who lived thousands of years before us. And so, as you listen, allow yourself to drift with the rising waters, to float gently through the stories of floods that shaped the earliest human world. Imagine the waters creeping slowly over lands, swallowing forests and valleys, reshaping rivers and lakes, until only fragments of the old world remain. Imagine the people who watched this happen, who survived by ingenuity or luck or divine guidance, who held on to the memory of their lost lands and passed it down to children and grandchildren. These myths are not simply stories of punishment or morality. They are echoes of a drowned world, of coastlines lost beneath the rising sea, of forests and plains submerged, of human resilience and adaptation. They remind us that the stories humans tell are often grounded in what they actually experienced, even if those experiences are filtered through generations of memory. They carry the weight of real events, even if transformed into narrative, even if draped in symbolism and imagination. And so, perhaps for a moment, you can imagine that the world of these myths once existed in ways that were familiar to those who lived through it. A world where water ruled, land emerged gradually, and humans had to navigate the shifting, changing landscape. A world remembered in story, passed from one generation to the next, until it became myth. And as the waters of the past continue to lap gently at the edges of memory, we are left with tales that whisper across time, reminding us that the past is not entirely lost, that humans have always carried their experiences forward, and that in these stories, a drowned world still survives. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world almost forgotten, a world that existed long before the maps we know, long before the cities we inhabit today. A world whispered about in the oldest stories, where humans remember not only the land and the rivers, the forests and the mountains, but also a sense of something extraordinary, a civilization, a people, a golden age that came before the present one, and that vanished as suddenly as it appeared. There is a quiet mystery here, a lingering question carried in myths across continents. Did humans once live in places that no longer exist, in societies that were advanced in ways we are only beginning to understand? Across time and culture, the idea of a lost civilization appears again and again. The Greeks told of Atlantis, a great island nation of astonishing knowledge and power, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. In the Tamil tradition, Kumari Kandam was a vast land to the south, home to a thriving civilization, now vanished beneath the Indian Ocean. Irish legends spoke of High Brazil, an island shrouded in mist, appearing and disappearing from sight, inhabited by people with knowledge of the stars and the earth. Mesoamerican stories tell of Aztlan, the ancestral homeland of the Aztecs, a place rich with culture and wisdom long lost to time. Even the concept of Lemuria, though a 19th century hypothesis, traces its roots to Pacific traditions that remembered lands submerged beneath the ocean, remnants of human presence lost to rising seas. These stories, while shaped and embellished over time, share a remarkable similarity. They describe a civilization with knowledge, artistry, and social organization that seems extraordinary for its era. And while myths are often dismissed as imagination, modern discoveries invite us to reconsider. Beneath layers of sediment, beneath the oceans, and within the earth itself, evidence emerges of human activity far older than conventional histories acknowledge. Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Built more than 11,000 years ago, it predates agriculture and permanent settlements. Massive stone pillars, arranged with remarkable precision, adorned with carvings of animals and abstract symbols, testify to sophisticated social organization and spiritual thought. This was a society capable of monumental architecture long before we thought humans were capable of such feats. Its very existence challenges assumptions about when complex civilizations could emerge, and hints that other advanced societies may have existed and vanished without leaving a written record. Along the coasts of India, the submerged city of Dwarka offers another whisper from the past. Ancient texts describe Dwarka as a magnificent city, home to kings and sages, with elaborate streets, docks, and temples. Archaeologists have discovered remains beneath the sea that correspond to these descriptions, structures, streets, and artifacts dating back thousands of years. For those who witnessed its submergence, stories would have been essential. Oral tradition preserved the memory of a thriving human community lost beneath rising waters, much like the myths of Atlantis and Kumari Kandam. Climate events also provide context for the sudden disappearance of societies. Around 10,800 BC, the Younger Dryas cold reversal brought abrupt shifts in temperature and weather patterns. Glaciers advanced, rainfall patterns changed, and ecosystems shifted dramatically. Human groups dependent on hunting, gathering, or early agriculture may have faced extreme stress, forcing migrations, adaptations, or even extinction. Yet, even in these upheavals, humans remembered. They told stories, passing down knowledge of the lands they lost, the cultures they inhabited, and the achievements of their ancestors. Trade networks during the Ice Age offer additional evidence of complexity. Hunter-gatherer societies, often imagined as isolated or simple, moved across vast distances, exchanging materials like obsidian, seashells, and pigments. They observed the stars, tracked migrations of animals, and coordinated survival across thousands of kilometers. These were societies with planning, foresight, and cultural continuity, skills that underpin the rise of civilizations.
Could myths of golden ages, lost lands, and extraordinary peoples reflect the memory of these early networks, societies advanced in ways that were subtle, adaptive, and deeply connected to their environments?
Even in regions far from one another, myths echo each other. Tales of lands disappearing beneath the waves, of people with extraordinary knowledge or abilities, of times when humans lived closer to the gods or the earth itself, appear in Ireland, India, Greece, Mesoamerica, and the Pacific. Some detail intricate knowledge of astronomy, architecture, or agriculture. Some describe the cataclysmic loss of these lands and peoples. Taken together, they suggest that humans did not invent these stories from nothing. They remembered, encoded, and transmitted knowledge of a world largely erased by climate, sea level rise, and catastrophe. And so, as you imagine these lost civilizations, consider the quiet brilliance of their existence. They may not have left behind the pyramids, the written laws, or the monumental cities we associate with civilization today, but they left something perhaps even more enduring: memory. Memory preserved in story, in ritual, in the subtle patterns of myth. Through myth, the essence of their lives, their knowledge, their struggles, and their triumphs survives, reaching us across the vast span of time. Close your eyes further and imagine walking the streets of Atlantis, the canals of Kumari-Kandam, or the mists of high Brazil. Imagine the people who once lived there, navigating their world with skill, courage, and creativity. They may have observed the stars to guide their migrations, built structures to honor the spirits of the land, or developed tools and practices we can barely comprehend today. And then, suddenly, the world changed. Waters rose, climates shifted, catastrophes struck. The societies that had flourished were overwhelmed, their lands submerged, their achievements erased from the landscape. Yet memory endured. Survivors carried the stories to new lands, recounted them to children, and gradually the stories became myth. The golden ages became legend. The lost continents became mystery. Names changed, details shifted, embellishments appeared, but the seed of truth remained. Human resilience, human ingenuity, human loss, all preserved in narrative form. And in listening to these myths today, we catch a glimpse of that long-vanished world, not through archaeology alone, but through the living memory of our ancestors. It is remarkable to consider that the people who first built these societies, who survived these upheavals, who passed these stories down through generations, were not fundamentally different from us. They were humans, like us, seeking to understand the world, to survive, to thrive, to leave something behind. And although the physical traces of their civilizations may have vanished, the stories remain. In these myths, we hear their voices echoing across millennia, guiding us to remember that human history is far older, far richer, and far stranger than we often imagine. So, as you drift through this reflection, let yourself imagine the quiet mystery of the lost civilizations. Let yourself walk along the coasts of vanished lands, wander among ancient stones, listen to the winds that once carried the voices of long-gone peoples. These myths, these whispers of what once was, remind us that the past is not entirely lost.
that human ingenuity and memory are remarkable in their persistence, that even when the world changes cataclysmically, the essence of human experience endures, carried forward in story, song, and imagination. And so, as you settle deeper into this thought, you can sense that these stories are not just myths, they are cultural echoes of real societies. Societies advanced in ways that suited their world, rich with knowledge, deeply connected to the environment, resilient, adaptive, and brilliant. Societies whose memory we still hold, even if the lands themselves are now hidden beneath water, ice, or time. Through myth, they continue to speak, inviting us to listen, to imagine, and to remember.
Imagine a sky at dusk, the light softening, clouds drifting slowly, the horizon deepening into gentle shades of blue and purple. In that quiet space between day and night, it's easy to imagine the first humans looking up, tracing patterns in the stars, noticing sudden flashes of light or strange movements in the clouds. To them, the sky was not empty. It was alive. It was active. It was full of beings and forces, moving, communicating, guiding, warning. And in that quiet observation, the earliest myths of sky people, descending visitors and mysterious phenomena began to take shape. Across cultures, stories of beings arriving from above appear with remarkable consistency. Some came as gods, others as teachers, some as guides, some as punishers. Their forms were interpreted through the lens of the world they knew. A sudden flash of light might be a meteor, but in myth, it became a divine messenger. A comet streaking across the night sky might be remembered as a sky serpent or a fiery chariot. Volcanic ash clouds rising and twisting like smoke from giant hands were described as dark-winged spirits descending from the heavens. Humans lacked the vocabulary for science, but they did not lack the need to explain what they saw. They translated the extraordinary into story, preserving memory through metaphor and symbol. The Hopi people of North America tell of Kachina beings, sky spirits who visit the earth, teaching lessons, guiding humans, and bringing life-giving rains. Their arrival, described in ceremonial masks and dances, may carry echoes of phenomena that inspired awe and fear: bright comets, atmospheric disturbances, or distant travelers arriving unexpectedly by water or land. Similarly, the Dogon of West Africa preserved detailed astronomical knowledge, describing the movements of Sirius and its companion stars. While scholars have debated the source of this knowledge, it is possible that these myths encode careful observation of the sky, combined with memory of interactions with other peoples who had different technological insights. In Norse mythology, the beef roast is a shimmering bridge connecting realms, a rainbow road that gods traverse to move between the heavens and the human world. Imagine the northern sky, auroras dancing across the horizon, the air crisp and cold, and early humans interpreting such ethereal phenomena not as random light, but as a passage for beings from beyond. The world of myth and the world of observation are intertwined. One informs the other. What the mind sees, the imagination shapes. What the imagination shapes, memory preserves. Even across the Pacific, Polynesian navigators spoke of people arriving from the sky. It may not have meant literally falling from the clouds, but from the perspective of observers on distant islands, the first sails on the horizon could appear like strange, shimmering forms descending from the heavens.
For those who had never seen advanced seafaring vessels, or whose own society had not yet developed ocean-going technology, such arrivals were extraordinary, impossible to describe in simple terms. Story was the best tool humans had to preserve the encounter, blending reality with symbolic language. Scientific ideas today help us to see the possible origins of these myths. The Tolman bolide theory proposes that comet or meteor impacts around 7,500 years ago created sudden floods, atmospheric shock waves, and widespread destruction. The Australasian strewn field, a vast area covered by tektites from a massive impact around 800,000 years ago, shows that Earth has experienced celestial events of enormous magnitude. To humans witnessing fragments of these phenomena, the flash, the fire, the smoke, the roar of impact, interpretation in terms of gods, spirits, or sky people would have been natural. The human brain seeks pattern, explanation, and meaning, especially when confronted with forces beyond comprehension. Consider volcanic eruptions. Ancient people often described ash clouds rising like colossal wings, dark and twisting, moving across the land. Lightning within the cloud might have been described as weapons, signals, or messages. The smoke could be interpreted as descent, a visitation, a presence from above. In myth, these observations became characters and events. In memory, the emotional core, the awe, the terror, the suddenness, the life-altering impact persisted, even if the literal description transformed into story. And it is fascinating to notice the similarities across cultures. Beings descend from the sky. They teach, warn, or bring catastrophe. They arrive unexpectedly, often accompanying bright lights, noise, or weather disturbances. The forms and names differ, but the underlying pattern, humans preserving memories of extraordinary sky phenomena, remains. Myths are not random imagination. They are compressed memory, a record of what humans could not otherwise quantify, measured not in meters or seconds, but in wonder, fear, and significance.
We might pause here to reflect on how the human mind responds to novelty and danger. An unexplainable flash of light in the night sky, the sound of something massive impacting the earth, a distant sail appearing over the horizon, all demand attention. They are remembered. They are discussed. They are transmitted. Even generations later, when the details blur, the story persists. The sky people arrive. The event is extraordinary. Humans respond, survive, and pass the story on. And so when we read of Kachina spirits, Dogon knowledge of distant stars, Bifrost, or the sky arrivals of Polynesian navigators, we are not simply encountering fantasy. We are hearing the echo of human observation, memory, and interpretation. These stories carry data, not measured, scientific, or literal, but emotional, perceptual, and cultural. The sky people are the vessels of information, preserved in a language humans could understand and share. The calm of this reflection is striking. Imagine the sky as your first textbook, your first record keeper. Stars, clouds, fireballs, smoke, wind, they are teachers, guides, and warnings. Humans observed, recorded in memory, and communicated across generations. What we call myth is the repository of this knowledge. The pattern of events repeated in story across time and geography suggests that people were preserving real phenomena long before telescopes, satellites, or meteorological instruments. Even the idea of visitors from another world does not need to invoke the extraordinary of science fiction. Instead, it may be the simplest explanation: humans encountering phenomena or people they could not otherwise explain. A traveler with unfamiliar tools, a sailor arriving from a distant island, a society with different technology or craft. These encounters could inspire stories of beings descending from the sky. Their actions, knowledge, or appearances would be extraordinary. To preserve the memory, humans described them in accessible and meaningful ways within their cultural and observational frameworks. Over generations, as details were interpreted, elaborated, or merged with natural events, the sky people became mythic. And so, in this quiet reflection, we can imagine early humans staring at the night sky, sensing movement and change, noting patterns and anomalies, passing stories to children and neighbors, preserving memory in narrative. Some events were literal, some symbolic, but all carried significance. A meteor strikes, a sailor arrives, ash clouds twist across the sky. The mind encodes the extraordinary into story. The story survives. Millennia later, we read of sky people, divine visitors, and cosmic bridges. And for a brief, calm moment, we connect with the minds of those who first looked up and wondered. The lesson here is subtle but profound. Myths of the sky preserve human experience with phenomena we now study scientifically. They are records of observation, memory, and interpretation filtered through emotion and culture. The sky people are the vessels of information, preserved in a language humans could understand and share. As you settle deeper into this thought, imagine standing under the stars, feeling the cool night air, and seeing a streak of light travel across the sky. The imagination interprets it, memory records it, story preserves it, and over thousands of years that story becomes myth. Sky people, visitors, divine messengers, perhaps they are not fantasy at all, but the echo of observation, memory, and human curiosity. The sky is alive, not with beings as we imagine them, but with events that captured the attention and wonder of our earliest ancestors. And in that gentle realization, the world feels connected. Past and present, observation and imagination, memory and myth, they merge in a quiet continuum. The sky people are not gone. They live on in story, waiting for us to look up, to wonder, to remember, and to drift into the night with the same curiosity that guided humans long ago.
Imagine walking slowly through a vast, frozen landscape, the ground crisp beneath your feet, the wind carrying the soft sound of distant movement. The world is immense and quiet, punctuated by the occasional echo of something enormous stirring into distance. For the earliest humans, the experience of living alongside creatures far larger than themselves was ordinary, even ordinary enough to shape the stories they would tell for thousands of years. Long before written records, humans encountered animals that towered above them, creatures whose sheer size inspired awe, fear, and wonder. Mammoths with sweeping tusks and shaggy coats, mastodons moving like living mountains, giant ground sloths that reared on hind legs taller than a human, and gigantopithecus in distant forests, with limbs and jaws far beyond our imagination. Even among human relatives, there were remarkable forms. Homo floresiensis, small but unusual in proportion, or other ancient cousins with exceptional height or robust builds. Bones left in the earth, often half buried or scattered, became the seeds of stories. Early humans would stumble upon them, marvel at their scale,
and wonder about the beings they had come from or still roamed the world. It is easy to see how these encounters gave birth to myths of giants. To a child or an adult accustomed to their own scale, a mammoth is a towering, almost human-like presence. A giant sloth, its claws reaching high into the trees, is a creature that commands respect and curiosity. Over time, as humans passed these stories to their children and neighbors, the images grew, the proportions exaggerated, and the beings became larger than life. The essential truth remained. Humans once shared the world with creatures that dwarfed them, and that memory was too powerful to lose. Across cultures, the idea of giants appears again and again, often with surprising similarities. In Norse mythology, the Jotnar roamed the forests, mountains, and seas, beings of incredible size and strength, sometimes in conflict with the gods, sometimes in quiet coexistence. The Greek Titans, ancient and colossal, embody the power of nature itself, pre-existing the Olympian gods and shaping the cosmos with their actions. Native American stories speak of the Great Ones, beings taller and stronger than ordinary humans, walking the earth in the earliest days, teaching, protecting, or simply inhabiting the land. In Sumerian lore, the Apkallu are often described as extraordinary in stature, part human, part divine, and carriers of wisdom. Even in the Pacific Islands, legends speak of giant chiefs, ancestors of immense size and presence, shaping the first societies and teaching the earliest people. Fossil evidence often mirrors these stories in ways that are quietly fascinating. Early humans may have come across the bones of mammoths, mastodons, or giant sloths, interpreting them as remains of ancient giants. A femur larger than any human could produce, a skull with enormous teeth, a rib spanning the length of a small hut. These finds must have felt like traces of beings beyond comprehension. Even without scientific understanding, humans intuitively recognized the significance of scale. It was a natural, almost gentle step to imagine that creatures of such size might have once walked the earth, interacting with people, inhabiting distant valleys, or towering over the forests. There is a peaceful connection here between imagination and observation. Humans are storytellers by nature. They observe the world, notice patterns, and encounter the extraordinary. Then they interpret, embellish, and pass the story along. Giants are not mere fantasy. They are the emotional, cultural, and symbolic preservation of what humans once saw. The tales of Jotnar, Titans, Apkallu, and Great Ones carry memory, not only of the creatures themselves, but of the experience of awe, the feeling of being small in a vast and dangerous world.
Even small details in myths echo real phenomena. The strength of giants may reflect the extraordinary power of mastodons or mammoths. Their long lives and immense knowledge might mirror human interpretations of the survival strategies of creatures that endured harsh Ice Age climates. Encounters with Gigantopithecus or Homo floresiensis, unusual in proportion and movement, may have been encoded into oral tradition as beings that are different in ways that feel larger than life. Every exaggeration, every element of magic or divinity is rooted in the simple, profound fact: humans once lived alongside creatures that defied the ordinary scale of human experience. And so, as you imagine these giants, picture them quietly moving through the forests and plains, indifferent to the tiny humans observing them. They are not malevolent or terrifying by default. They are simply present, reminders of a world that was larger, stranger, and more magnificent than we often imagine. Through myth, their presence persists. Humans remember not just the creature itself, but the feeling of encountering something impossible, of standing in the shadow of beings whose size and power demanded attention, respect, and storytelling. In this reflection, you may notice a gentle rhythm in the way memory shapes narrative. A discovery becomes a story becomes myth, a myth survives across generations. Fossils, footprints, and impressions in the earth provide tangible evidence, while stories carry the intangible, awe, wonder, and understanding. The giants exist both as memory and as symbol, bridging the gap between what humans experienced and what they could describe. They are a form of data preserved in narrative that allows us to glimpse the world as early humans perceived it. It is also worth noting the interplay between fear and familiarity in these stories. Giants are often described as powerful, sometimes dangerous, sometimes wise. These qualities reflect what humans might have felt when encountering enormous Ice Age animals. Both fascination and caution, curiosity and respect. Myths encode the duality of experience, the thrill of witnessing the extraordinary, the need to survive in a world shared with beings far beyond ordinary comprehension. Even today, when we consider the size of a mammoth or the height of a giant sloth, we can feel a quiet echo of that experience. We may never walk alongside such creatures, but by reading and imagining these myths, we connect to a continuity of human perception. The giants of story are the preserved impression of a reality that shaped human imagination for tens of thousands of years. They are memory sculpted by culture, observation, and time. So as you drift through this chapter, imagine a serene forest, frozen plains, or rolling hills under an Ice Age sky. Picture a mammoth moving slowly in the distance, tusks curving skyward, fur brushing the snow. Hear the gentle crunch of giant claws on the frozen ground. Feel the hush of the forest as a massive creature passes. Imagine a giant sloth reaching high into a tree, a gigantopithecus moving silently along a riverbank. These are not threats, but witnesses to a world we are only beginning to understand, preserved for us in myth and memory. And in that quiet observation, notice the lesson embedded in every story of giants. Memory preserves scale, significance, and impact. Myths are not simply fiction. They are compressed records of human experience, encoding encounters with beings that shaped perception, survival, and culture. When a story tells of giants, it is telling us about the extraordinary world that humans once inhabited, the creatures they shared it with, and the awe those creatures inspired. Through this calm reflection, it becomes clear that myths of giants are a gentle bridge across time. They remind us that early humans were observant, imaginative, and capable of preserving knowledge in ways that endure long after the creatures themselves vanished. They remind us that the world was once larger, wilder, and more magnificent than our present eyes can easily perceive. And they remind us that the human mind has always sought to capture wonder, to transform it into narrative, and to pass it forward. As you settle deeper into these thoughts, let the giants of myth walk quietly beside you, shadows against the snow, silhouettes in the forests, echoes of a world that was once both real and immense. And in that quiet observation, notice the lesson embedded in every story of giants. Memory preserves scale, significance, and impact. Myths are not simply fiction, they are compressed records of human experience, encoding encounters with beings that shaped perception, survival, and culture. When a story tells of giants, it is telling us about the extraordinary world that humans once inhabited, the creatures they shared it with, and the awe those creatures inspired.
Imagine sitting outside, long after the sun has set, the air cool and still, when suddenly the sky seems to change. A streak of light arcs across the darkness. A distant rumble shakes the earth. A strange heat brushes your skin. Long ago, before calendars or telescopes, before writing or scientific vocabulary, the first humans saw moments like this and had only one tool to make sense of them: storytelling. They described the world as they felt it, with awe, fear, and wonder. When fire fell from the sky, it was not understood as a rock from space or an electrical discharge. It was interpreted as the action of gods, as a warning, as punishment, or as a sign that the world itself was alive and watching. Almost every culture contains stories of fire from above. Aboriginal Australians tell of the day the fire star fell, a story preserved across millennia, describing a bright object blazing in the sky, scorching the land, leaving fires and devastation in its wake. Native American traditions speak of fields igniting without warning, of thunderous noise above, of skies glowing red in a way that could not be explained. In Egypt, the Ipuwer papyrus tells of a time when the sky burned like a torch, chaos spread across the land, and the very order of society seemed undone. In Greece, Phaeton, the son of the sun, loses control of his father's chariot, and the earth below is set aflame. The stories are strikingly similar in emotion and description. A sky ablaze, the land suffering, humans struggling to understand the cause. Modern science offers intriguing possibilities for the origins of these myths. Meteor impacts leave sudden dramatic effects. The Younger Dryas period, roughly 12,800 years ago, may have been punctuated by an impact event or series of airbursts, scattering debris, igniting fires, and dramatically shifting climate patterns. Smaller airbursts, like Tunguska in 1908, flattened thousands of square kilometers of Siberian forest, yet left little evidence of a crater. Imagine what early humans might have witnessed in their own time: trees burning, the sky roaring, a sense of catastrophe descending from above. How could they describe such events without the language of physics? Through metaphor, symbolism, and myth. The result is a story in which fire is alive, intentional, and often divine. Volcanoes offer another form of sky fire that leaves deep impressions in human memory. Eruptions spew glowing lava, ash clouds that darken the sun, lightning dancing in thick smoke, and thunderous roars echoing from miles. Across time, cultures have described these events with symbolic language: gods angered, dragons uncoiling, celestial serpents descending. The volcanic eruption at Thera, affecting the Minoan civilization, likely inspired tales of divine punishment and cataclysmic floods, while smaller eruptions would have been interpreted as warnings from the sky. The impact of such events is not limited to immediate destruction. They shape culture, instill awe, and leave memory encoded in myth. In some myths, fire from the sky is not just destruction, but transformation. Stories of fiery dragons, serpents, or celestial weapons often accompany tales of renewal.
Humans observed that the land burned but then greened again, that fire could clear fields and allow new growth. Even as myths emphasize devastation, they encode subtle observations: fire as force, fire as change, fire as powerful and incomprehensible. Ancient people saw patterns they could not quantify: heat, light, smoke, and sound, and translated them into beings with intention. Lightning became a weapon. Meteors became celestial messengers. Volcanic fire became the anger of gods. In the Aboriginal story of the fire star, the land itself seemed alive in response. Trees fell in patterns, rivers changed course, animals fled, and humans learned caution and resilience. Native American accounts similarly emphasize not just destruction, but lessons. Signs of future events, signs of cycles, memory encoded into the stories passed down. The Greeks, through Phaeton, dramatized the danger of power misused, but also the relationship between the human and the divine, the known and the unknown. Across cultures, the emotional core is consistent. The sky can act, the heavens can punish, and humans must interpret, survive, and remember.
Airbursts and meteors are terrifying because they are sudden, unpredictable, and immense. Tunguska, though small compared to some theorized ancient impacts, released the energy of hundreds of Hiroshima bombs in seconds, flattening forests without leaving a classic crater. Imagine what a similar event might have felt like for humans without instruments. Entire forests gone, fire spreading, birds and animals fleeing in chaos, dust obscuring the sky for days. Stories would have been inevitable, carrying the memory forward. Myths preserved not precise measurements, but impressions. The scale of devastation, the sense of divine or cosmic action, and the emotional truth of survival. Volcanic ash clouds, too, can appear as supernatural beings. Rising plumes sometimes twist and shimmer in sunlight, creating shapes in the sky that look alive. Early observers, lacking technical vocabulary, interpreted these forms as dragons, serpents, or spirits. Lightning strikes within clouds appeared as weapons in motion, thunder as a voice. Ancient observers recorded their experience through metaphor, and in doing so, created enduring myths. They compressed terrifying natural phenomena into forms that could be told, remembered, and understood. Even the Bronze Age collapse, a period of widespread societal upheaval across the Mediterranean, may contain echoes of celestial catastrophe. Some scholars suggest comets, meteors, or climatic disruptions played a role, and the myths of fires from heaven in various cultures could be an echo of this period. The emotional resonance, fear, awe, confusion, survival, is what survives in myth, not exact chronology or scientific detail. The stories act as a kind of memory, compressed and symbolic, encoding real events for future generations. The Phaeton myth is particularly instructive because it blends observation and narrative. The chariot of the sun, the fiery descent, the scorched earth. This is not a literal observation, but a symbolic representation of phenomena humans did witness. Perhaps a bright meteor, perhaps a solar reflection on ash clouds, perhaps a volcanic eruption in distant lands. The story preserves the memory of fire from above, encoded in the language of divine narrative. The Greeks, like all humans, translated extraordinary events into the framework they knew, the gods. Aboriginal and Native American stories emphasize the suddenness and unpredictability of these events. Humans noticed that fire could come without warning, that destruction could fall from the sky,
and that survival depended on awareness, respect, and storytelling. By encoding these experiences into myth, humans preserved both memory and caution. These stories are data stored in narrative, teaching lessons and preserving the emotional weight of catastrophe. When you think about these myths now, imagine sitting beneath the night sky, the world quiet, when a streak of light appears, and when the distant rumble rolls softly through the hills. Imagine how early humans must have felt, and how they made sense of these events. They did not have the language of science, but they had imagination, observation, and the need to survive. Fire from above became gods, dragons, serpents, celestial chariots, all ways of expressing what they had witnessed. The memory persisted because the events were unforgettable, encoded in story, passed from generation to generation. Even today, when we look at meteor showers, erupting volcanoes, or streaks of lightning in distant clouds, we feel a quiet echo of that awe. The same instinct that led early humans to create myths, the need to interpret, encode, and remember, remains within us. Fire from above is not just narrative, it is preserved experience, captured in the symbolic language of myth. It is the memory of humans witnessing the extraordinary, the terrifying, and the magnificent. And as you imagine these events, let the stories move slowly through your mind. Picture the sky burning with strange lights. Hear the distant roar of air and fire. Feel the awe of being tiny beneath a vast, living sky. Recognize the wisdom embedded in myth, that even in the face of unimaginable forces, humans observe, remember, and pass knowledge forward. These stories, carried through generations, are the quiet record of real events, shaped by emotion, culture, and imagination, preserved so that we can glimpse the world as it once was, through the eyes of those who lived under extraordinary skies.
Imagine a world where the familiar is no longer familiar, where the hills, rivers, and skies you know seem to have changed overnight, as if the earth itself has been rewritten. For early humans, sudden shifts in the environment, ice advancing, seas rising, volcanoes darkening the sky, must have felt like the world itself was beginning again. In the myths they left behind, we find stories of previous worlds, cycles of destruction and rebirth, the sense that what we call now is only one chapter in a much longer tale. Many cultures believed that our current existence is not the first, that before this world others came and went. The Maya, with their long count calendar, marked cycles spanning thousands of years, each concluding with a kind of cosmic reset. The Hopi spoke of the 5 worlds, each one ending in catastrophe, each one giving way to the next. Hindu tradition describes the yugas, vast ages of time, where the universe itself moves through stages of virtue and decay, creation and destruction. Greek myths tell of the ages of man, from the golden age of harmony to the iron age of toil, each fading into the next. Even the Sumerian kings list suggests a time when rulers lived for thousands of years, a distant world erased by a great flood, leaving only fragments of memory. Across continents and millennia, the same instinct appears. The world changes, and humans encode that change as cycles, as previous worlds, as epochs lost and remembered in myth. These stories are not simply fanciful imagination.
They may preserve the memory of real environmental upheavals, recorded in the only language early humans had, narrative. Ice ages pushed glaciers across landscapes, altering rivers, lakes, and coastlines. Populations were forced to move, to adapt, to survive in new conditions. Sudden meltwater pulses, like those that raised the seas by tens of meters at the end of the last ice age, would have submerged familiar lands. Volcanoes darkened the sky, blanketing the sun with ash for months, perhaps years, altering weather patterns and forcing crops to fail. Even today, we know that the Younger Dryas, a sudden cold reversal around 12,800 years ago, transformed entire regions, triggering extinctions, migrations, and societal collapse. For the humans witnessing such events, it would have seemed as though the world itself had begun anew. The idea of previous worlds also serves a psychological purpose. When disaster strikes on a massive scale, humans naturally try to make sense of it. Catastrophes are not isolated. They are tied to memory, tradition, and the search for patterns. If a community sees the rivers rising, the soil failing, and the animals disappearing, it is only natural to imagine that such things have happened before, in cycles beyond human reckoning. Myths encode this perspective. The floods, fires, or famines of the past are not random. They are part of a larger rhythm, a sequence of worlds that rise, fall, and are reborn. Consider the Hopi 5 worlds. Each world ends in a different kind of catastrophe, flood, fire, or other destruction, but from each ending a small group survives, carrying knowledge forward. In the narrative, the survivors are chosen, guided, or protected, and they witness the transition firsthand. This mirrors human experience. In the face of disaster, survival is selective, memory is preserved, and storytelling becomes the vessel for both. These myths are comforting in a way, suggesting that even when a world ends, life continues, knowledge survives, and the next world emerges from the old. It is a recognition of continuity amid chaos.
The Hindu yugas describe even longer cycles, ages so vast that they dwarf human lifespans. These epochs are characterized by rising and falling virtue, order and decay, sometimes ending in cataclysm before a new age begins. It is a poetic reflection of environmental, societal, and cosmic change. Though the scale is immense, the human experience at its heart is recognizable. Observation of patterns, recognition of transformation, and the need to encode that knowledge into story. The Greeks, too, capture this idea on a smaller scale. From the Golden Age to the Iron Age, humanity changes, civilizations rise and fall, and the memory of previous eras becomes legend. Even without precise knowledge of climate cycles or extinction events, ancient people observed the effects and preserved them symbolically. Geology and climate science suggest that these observations were not baseless. The planet undergoes cycles, glacial and interglacial periods, volcanic eruptions, sudden cooling or warming events that can dramatically alter the human environment. Extinction events wipe out megafauna, rising seas redraw coastlines, and cataclysmic events force survivors to adapt. For humans living without instruments, maps, or long-term records, these transformations are experienced as profound shifts. The familiar disappears, the world seems to restart, and the survivors must reconstruct memory and meaning. Myths of previous worlds may be precisely this reconstruction, a narrative encoding of environmental history. Even the Sumerian Kings List, with its extraordinary pre-flood lifespans, can be interpreted in this context. Perhaps these accounts memorialize societies disrupted by massive floods, ice age meltwater pulses, or other environmental catastrophes. The exact numbers and details may be symbolic exaggerations, but the core message remains. There was a world before this one, it ended, and its memory shaped the stories of those who followed. By preserving these myths, humans encoded knowledge of environmental risk, survival, and the fragility of human achievement. Across cultures, these narratives share remarkable similarities. Floods, fires, darkened skies, shifting lands, patterns appear again and again, suggesting a shared human experience of observing dramatic change. Even when separated by thousands of miles and millennia, early humans interpreted similar phenomena in comparable ways. This is not coincidence. It is a reflection of the human mind trying to understand forces far larger than themselves. Myths preserve the emotional and experiential truth even when the literal details are lost. They are a bridge between observation and memory, a symbolic ledger of catastrophe and renewal. When you consider these myths tonight, picture the survivors of previous worlds. Imagine them standing on newly risen land after a flood, observing the horizon after fire has swept across the plains, or emerging from winter's icy grip into an unfamiliar landscape. They remember what was lost, they encode it in story, and they pass it to the next generation. In this way, the cycles of destruction and rebirth are not just abstract concepts, they are lived experiences, transformed into narrative, preserved for thousands of years. The myths are a testament to resilience, to observation, and to the human need to understand the rhythms of the earth. In the quiet of your own space, you can sense these cycles gently unfolding even now. Imagine the slow pace of geological time, the rise and fall of seas, the advance and retreat of glaciers, the ash drifting from distant volcanoes, the sudden streak of a meteor. Across all of this, humans watch, record, and encode what they see in story. The myths of previous worlds are the soft hum of memory across generations, a lullaby of caution and wonder. They tell us that what seems eternal is fragile, that change is inevitable, and that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. As you breathe and settle deeper, let these ancient narratives flow around you. Feel the rhythm of time stretching outward, worlds ending, worlds beginning, cycles of creation and destruction. Recognize the wisdom hidden in myth. The earth has changed before. It will change again, and humans have always observed, remembered, and survived. These stories are not mere fantasy. They are echoes of lived experience, transformed through imagination,
preserved in cultural memory and passed gently to us across millennia. And so, the myth of a previous world becomes more than a tale. It is a record of observation, a testament to survival, a map of emotional truth, and a reminder that life continues as the world shifts beneath our feet. As you drift toward rest, imagine the quiet patience of generations witnessing change, recording memory, and entrusting it to story, the soft, enduring pulse of human experience across the cycles of time.
As we settle into this quiet space together, let us breathe slowly and allow the journey through ancient stories to soften into gentle understanding. The myths we have explored are not just flights of fancy. They are echoes of human experience, preserved across millennia, passed from voice to voice, generation to generation. They are the quiet pulse of memory, sometimes stretched or reshaped, but never entirely lost. And as we reflect, patterns emerge, threads that connect seemingly fantastical tales to the real world humans once inhabited. The great flood myths are perhaps the clearest example. Nearly every culture, across every continent, has told a story of waters rising, of lands submerged, of humanity clinging to survival on a vessel or guided by a divine hand. From Mesopotamia to the Americas, from the islands of the Pacific to the shores of northern Europe, these stories share a common structure. Water first, land second. Catastrophe overwhelming, yet life persisting. Science whispers its agreement here, gently but insistently. At the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose by more than 100 meters, transforming coastlines, submerging familiar lands, and forcing communities to migrate. The Black Sea may have flooded suddenly. Doggerland disappeared beneath the North Sea, and the Sunda Shelf sank into the waters of Southeast Asia. Flood myths are not merely imaginative. They are human memory encoded in story, a testimony of survival in the face of overwhelming change. Equally compelling are the stories of lost lands, of golden ages and vanished continents. Atlantis, Kumari Kondam, High Brazil, Aztlan. These tales may carry echoes of real places, cities, or societies, erased by rising waters or sudden climate shifts. Archaeology offers whispers of truth here. Submerged cities off the coast of India, Ice Age trading networks connecting distant regions, Göbekli Tepe predating agriculture, entire cultures disrupted by the Younger Dryas cold reversal. These myths are not just tales of imagination. They are cultural memory of complex societies that vanished, leaving only stories behind. They remind us that humanity has always been shaped by its environment, and that memory is one of the first tools used to preserve what we cannot hold. Fire from the sky is another motif that appears across traditions. Myths speak of burning skies, of heavenly wrath, of fire raining down on the earth. Aboriginal accounts tell of the day the fire star fell. Native American stories describe loud, destructive skies, and ancient Egyptian papyri speak of the heavens ablaze. Science offers explanations that do not diminish the awe. Meteor impacts, airbursts like Tunguska, volcanic eruptions painting the sky with fire and ash, or intense plasma storms lighting the heavens.
The ancients described these events as gods, dragons, or celestial punishment, because that was the language they had. Their myths preserve the terror, the scale, and the significance of events far beyond ordinary human comprehension. And in doing so, they encode real, dramatic history. Stories of giants and mythic beasts also carry threads of truth. The enormous creatures of the Ice Age, mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, Gigantopithecus, Homo floresiensis, walked alongside early humans. Their bones, when discovered later, inspired tales of beings larger than life. Norse Jotnar, Greek Titans, Native American Great Ones, Sumerian Upkalu, Pacific Islander giant chiefs, all reflect a human attempt to reconcile lived experience with understanding. These myths are not fantasies invented from nothing. They are symbolic memory of creatures who truly existed, magnified through the lens of human perception and storytelling.
Creation myths, too, often carry echoes of real environmental observation. Tales of the world beginning in water, of sky and earth once connected, of land rising from chaos. These stories may encode memories of rising seas, shifting landscapes, and geological upheaval. Across the globe, humans have witnessed and recorded, in symbolic terms, events that dramatically transformed their world. Water, sky, fire, earth, all elements familiar yet incomprehensible in scale, became characters and stories, embodiments of forces that shaped survival, settlement, and culture. These myths remind us that early humans were careful observers, translating complex natural phenomena into narrative, ensuring that essential information survived beyond a single lifetime. As we reflect gently on these threads, a picture emerges. Mythology is not mere fantasy. It is humanity remembering itself. It is observation encoded in symbolism, memory preserved in story, and emotion preserved in imagery. When we hear about floods, fires, giants, sky people, lost continents, or cosmic cycles, we are not merely listening to tales meant to entertain. We are hearing the echoes of human experience, filtered through imagination, recorded through generations, and passed on with care. These are stories of survival, of wonder, of observation, and of the enduring human desire to make sense of the world. There is a quiet magic in this understanding. It is not the kind of magic that strikes suddenly with smoke and thunder. It is a gentle, persistent magic, the continuity of human memory, the resilience of story, the way observation becomes narrative and narrative becomes culture. Myths are a bridge across time, connecting us to the earliest humans who looked at the sky, the land, and the seas, who noticed patterns and who encoded their experience for those who would come after. In this light, the myths most likely to be true are not only the ones with scientific or archaeological corroboration. They are all the stories, when approached as memory, as emotional truth, as humanity reaching across centuries to preserve what mattered. Tonight, as you listen and breathe quietly, consider this. Every tale of water, fire, sky, or earth carries fragments of reality. Every story of a giant, a strange being, or a lost city may preserve observations of life that once existed, events that once shook the world, or societies that flourished and vanished.
Mythology, at its core, is humanity remembering itself, our curiosity, our fear, our awe, and our unbroken desire to understand. And so, as you settle deeper, allow the myths to flow around you, not as distant fables, but as whispers of the human mind across millennia. Feel the connection to those who witnessed floods and fire, who walked alongside megafauna, who watched the skies with wonder and trepidation, and who carried their memories forward in stories. The truths may be hidden, transformed, and symbolic, but they remain, patiently waiting for those who will listen, for those who will wonder, and for those, like you, who seek to drift into the quiet rhythm of human memory, embracing the gentle certainty that even as the world changes, the stories endure.
As we drift toward the end of our journey tonight, let us linger in the quiet, letting the stories settle around us like soft, lingering mist. Myths are not false. They are not merely inventions meant to entertain or scare. They are the oldest form of remembering, the first attempts humans ever made to hold on to what mattered, to record what was seen, felt, and survived. In every tale of gods and monsters, of floods and fire, of giants and sky people, there is a thread that connects us to the earliest observers of our world. These threads are fragile, woven through generations, yet enduring, like whispers that refuse to vanish even when the voices that spoke them have long fallen silent. Consider for a moment the flood myths, gently rolling across the centuries. Picture the waters rising, slow and relentless, reshaping the land beneath human feet. Imagine the people who witnessed this, clinging to survival, watching the old world disappear and the new one emerge. Through story, they preserved not the precise details of dates or measurements, but the emotional truth, the sheer magnitude of what they endured. Every retelling, every generation stretched the story, shaped it, but the essence remained, humans remembering a world changed forever. Think of the myths of lost lands, of golden ages and vanished cities. Atlantis, Kumarikondam, High Brazil, Aztlan. Names that echo like distant bells calling to us from deep time. Perhaps they were cities submerged by the sea. Perhaps civilizations erased by ice and fire. Perhaps just fragments of memory carried forward by the human mind. In each, we hear the resonance of a real world that existed, even if only for a moment, before disappearing into the currents of history. Through myth, that world endures, patiently waiting to be glimpsed by those willing to see between the lines. The fire from the sky, the giants, the sky people, all these too carry hints of reality. Meteor impacts, volcanic eruptions, enormous creatures, unusual visitors from distant shores, events that demanded attention, that reshaped lives, that inspired awe and fear. Early humans had no charts, no formulas, no scientific vocabulary. They had imagination, observation, and the impulse to preserve. And so they told stories. Not lies, not fantasies in the modern sense, but memory translated into symbols. They recorded the world as they could, through narrative, metaphor, and emotion, leaving behind a map of human experience encoded in the rhythms of myth. Now, as you breathe slowly and feel the day's weight lifting,
Allow yourself to carry this thought gently. Somewhere beneath the stories of gods and monsters, heroes and worlds remade, is the whisper of something real. It is subtle, quiet, almost imperceptible, yet persistent. It is the echo of human experience, stretching across centuries, bridging the past to the present, connecting us to those who came long before us, who looked at the sky, the seas, and the land, and sought to understand, to remember, and to pass that memory forward. There is a comfort in this realization. Myths are not obstacles to knowledge, not distractions from truth. They are a different kind of truth, a truth of perception, memory, and survival. They remind us that humans have always sought to make sense of the world, to find order in chaos, to hold meaning in moments too vast, too terrifying, or too beautiful to measure. And they remind us that stories endure, patiently, softly, carrying the quiet pulse of humanity across time. As your thoughts begin to soften and the edges of wakefulness blur, allow the whispers of these ancient myths to mingle with your own dreams. Let them remind you that memory, observation, and imagination are threads woven into the same fabric, that the world is deeper than what we can see, and that even the oldest stories can bring a sense of wonder, calm, and connection. Thank you for allowing yourself this time, for joining in this quiet exploration, for listening with care and curiosity. May the echoes of these ancient stories settle gently in your mind, like soft waves on a distant shore. May they inspire calm reflection, wonder, and a sense of being part of something far greater, stretching across time and space. And as you drift fully into sleep, carry this final thought with you. Myths are humanity remembering itself. Beneath every tale lies memory, beneath every story lies the pulse of the past, and beneath it all, the quiet certainty that something real once was, and, in story, continues to be. Sleep well, and let the whispers of the oldest stories guide you into dreams.